Ladies and gentlemen of the media and those joining us virtually, good morning. Thanks for joining us at the Planning Institute of Jamaica quarterly press briefing. Today, the Director General, Dr. Wayne Henry, will provide preliminary estimates on the performance of the economy for the July to September 2022 period. An update on the medium-term socio-economic framework MTF 2021 to 2024 will also be provided. Dr. Henry, you may go ahead.
The PIOJ presents preliminary estimates on economic performance for each quarter, approximately 6 weeks following the end of the quarter being reviewed. This is based on the latest available information from major data providers. This release of the preliminary estimate is consistent with protocols in modern economies globally, where it is a common practice to release preliminary estimates before the final official figures are published. In the case of Jamaica, the PIOJ releases the preliminary growth estimate within the first 6 weeks following the end of the quarter being reviewed, and Statin releases the official GDP figures at the end of the third month following the quarter being reviewed. The preliminary outturn is used by various stakeholders, including our international development partners, the private sector, as well as the government, for whom the magnitude and direction of sectoral performance is critical to inform planning and policy-related decisions. Today, we are reporting an estimated real value added growth of 4.3% for the July to September 2022 quarter, relative to the corresponding quarter of 2021. The estimated outturn for the review quarter largely reflected the impact of one, the removal of COVID-19 containment measures globally, which facilitated increased domestic and external demand, resulting in a continuation of the economic recovery process. Two, higher levels of employment as firms increased operations to meet the growth in demand. Three, increased business and consumer confidence associated with the prospects for strengthened economic outturn in the short to medium term. And four, higher levels of productivity in the agriculture industry, evidenced by an increase in output per hectare. Real sector developments. Developments in the goods producing industry. The goods producing industry is estimated to have expanded by 3.2% due to improved performances in two of the four industries, namely agriculture and manufacturing. Agriculture. Real value added for the agriculture, forestry, and fishing industry was estimated to have grown by 15.4%. This improvement reflected increased supply in response to higher demand, particularly from the hotels and restaurants industry, associated with the removal of measures previously implemented to stem the spread of COVID-19. Also contributing to the improved outturn was an expansion in the hectares of domestic crops reaped, and improved productivity reflected in increased output per hectare. The industry's performance was driven by higher output in all subcomponents of the industry, with the exception of post-harvest activities. The other agricultural crops was estimated to have grown by 16.1%, reflecting higher production in all 9 crop groups. The largest increases were recorded for plantains, up 21.9%, fruits, up 20.8%, yams, up 19.1%, and vegetables, up 18.5%. Higher output was recorded for traditional export crops, which increased by 19.7%, largely reflecting growth in the production of banana, up 16.7%, and sugarcane, for which 25,107 tons were produced, relative to none in the corresponding quarter of 2021. Animal farming was estimated to have increased by 22.2% due to higher broiler meat production, up 30.9%, and egg production, up 6.6% to 59 million eggs. Mining and quarrying. Real value added for the mining and quarrying industry decreased by an estimated 30.4% due to declines in both alumina and crude bauxite production. Alumina production decreased by 38.8%, largely due to lower production from the 2 operating alumina refineries. The alumina capacity utilization rate for the industry decreased to 17.9%, down 4.9 percentage points, reflecting 1, technical issues affecting the Windalco refinery, as well as 2, low utilization at the Jamalco refinery as it gradually ramps up production to normal operating levels following the cessation of operations due to a fire at its powerhouse in August 2021. Crude bauxite production fell by 10.3%, reflecting the impact of lower demand from overseas purchasers. Consequently, the bauxite capacity utilization rate decreased to 42.8%, down 4.9 percentage points. Manufacturing. Growth in the manufacturing industry was estimated to be 3.5%, stemming from increased output in the sub-industries, food, beverages, and tobacco, and other manufacturing. The growth in the food, beverages, and tobacco sub-industry reflected higher production for animal feed, up 17.1%, poultry meat, up 29.8%, dairy products, up 61.9%, and rum and alcohol, up 34.4%. These increases were sufficient to outweigh declines recorded for edible oils and fats, beer and stout, and condensed milk. Other manufacturing grew, mainly reflecting higher production in the non-metallic minerals component. Within the non-metallic minerals component, the main drivers were cement production, up 30.4%, and clinker, up 18.9%. Further growth was constrained by a contraction in the production of petroleum products surveyed, including liquid petroleum gas, LPG, down 100%, gasoline, down 22.5%, fuel oil, down 5.4%, and turbo fuel, down 8%. Construction. Real value added for the construction industry decreased by 2.2% due to a contraction in the other construction category, which outweighed an estimated increase in building construction. The industry's performance was reflected in a 2.7% real decrease in the sales of construction-related inputs. Contraction in the other construction component was due to a decline in capital expenditure on civil engineering activities, largely stemming from National Works Agency, NWA, which disbursed $5.9 billion relative to $9.1 billion in the corresponding quarter of 2021. Expenditure was primarily for projects associated with Part B of the South Coast Highway Improvement Project, which is scheduled to be completed in March 2023, and JPS, which disbursed $1.8 billion, down from $1.9 billion in the corresponding quarter of 2021. Expenditure during the quarter was for the construction and installation activities related to the generation and distribution of power. The estimated growth in the building construction component was driven mainly by the performance of the residential component, supported by a 103% increase in housing starts by the NHT, as well as a 23.9% increase in the value of mortgages disbursed. Developments in the services industry. The services industry was estimated to have grown by 4.7% relative to the corresponding quarter of 2021, reflecting higher real value added for all industries. Electricity and water supply. The electricity and water supply industry was estimated to have recorded growth in real value added of 3.8% due to higher electricity consumption. Electricity consumption grew by 5.1% due to higher consumption in 4 of the 6 categories. Higher sales were recorded for general service, that's small businesses using less than 25 kilovolt ampere kVA, which was up 11.3%. Power service, that's large businesses using more than 25 kVA but less than 500 kVA was up 6.8%. Large power, that's businesses using more than 500 kVA, was up 7%. And largest power, that's single locations with a minimum peak demand of 2,000 kVA, was up 23.9%. However, lower consumption was recorded for residential and street lighting and traffic signals, down 3.1% and 16.6% respectively. In contrast to the increase in electricity consumption, water consumption declined by 0.8%, reflecting decreases in 7 of the 14 parishes, led by Westmoreland, down 7.2%, Kingston and St. Andrew down 4.7%, and Trelawney down 4.3%. Transport, storage, and communication. Real value added for the transport, storage, and communication grew by 3.6%, mainly due to higher levels of activities in both the transport and storage and communication components. This outturn was largely driven by an improvement in the air transport component, reflecting growth in passenger movement, up 56.2%, due to departures up 50.8%, and arrivals were up 55.2%, and in transit was up 839.4%. The increased air travel was facilitated by a 43.3% increase in aircraft movement. Wholesale and retail trade, repair and installation of machinery, WR trade. Real value added for the wholesale and retail trade, repair and installation of machinery, WR trim industry, was estimated to have grown by 7.5% due to increased demand stemming from higher employment levels by 53,000 persons, growth in the related manufacturing and agriculture, forestry, and fishing industries, and the removal of COVID-19 containment measures. Higher sales were recorded for 5 of the 8 categories in real terms, including other wholesale and retail sale of goods and services in specialized and non-specialized stores, up 11.2%, motor vehicles, auto repairs and accessories, up 9.2%, and minerals, fuels, lubricants, and petroleum products, up 35.6%. Agriculture, food, beverages, and tobacco, up 7.3%, and textiles, clothing, shoes, and jewelry, up 33.3%. Finance and insurance services. Real value added for the finance and insurance services industry was estimated to have grown by 1%. This performance was influenced by increased profitability at deposit-taking institutions, driven by a rise in net fees and commissions. This was supported by higher levels of employment and consumer confidence, which drove increased demand for financial services. Hotels and restaurants. Real value added for the hotels and restaurants industry was estimated to have grown by 29.6%. Stopover visitor arrivals for July to August 2022 increased by 42% relative to the corresponding period of 2021. Of note, stopover arrivals for the month of August 2022 was 218,849, representing the highest on record for any August, and signals a return to pre-COVID monthly arrival levels. Cruise passenger arrivals total 156,609 in July to August 2022, relative to 3,496 in the corresponding period of 2021. Visitor expenditure was estimated to have increased by 49.5% to US $692.8 million for July to August of 2022, relative to July to August of 2021. Looking at the first 9 months of 2022, or GDP performance, for January to September 2022, real value added was estimated to have increased by 5.2%. This reflected higher real value added for both the goods producing industry, up 0.6%, and the services industry, up 6.7%. All industries recorded growth in output, with the exception of mining and quarrying and construction. Growth for the 9-month period was led by hotels and restaurants, up 58.2%, and agriculture, forestry, and fishing, up 9.8%. And looking at the employment update. Regarding the employment outturn, Statin has already provided an update on the labor force survey for July 2022. And as such, we will not present a detailed report on this area. The highlights, however, are that for the month of July 2022, the unemployment rate was 6.6%, down 1.9 percentage points. Youth unemployment decreased by 7.2 percentage points to 16.7%. The number of persons employed increased by 53,000 persons relative to July 2021. Male employment increased by 11,000 to 688,500 persons, while for females, employment increased by 42,000 persons to 579,500. The age cohorts with the largest increases were 20 to 24, up 15,400 persons, 25 to 34, up 12,900 persons, and 35 to 44, up 9,000 persons. I'll now turn to an update on Vision 2030 Jamaica, the National Development Plan. Vision 2030 Jamaica is a plan for the sustainable and inclusive development of Jamaica. The successive 3-year medium-term socio-economic policy frameworks, MTFs, serve as the main mechanism for advancing the implementation of Vision 2030 Jamaica and the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. The latest MTF, which is now in its 5th iteration, covers the period 2021 to 2024 and was approved by Cabinet on October 24, 2022. The important role that ministries, departments, and agencies, MDAs, play in the implementation of Vision 2030 Jamaica was reiterated. This was evidenced by the inclusion of a directive to MDAs to support the implementation of MTF 2021 to 2024 through the alignment of their strategic business plans, corporate and operational plans, and budgets with the MTF. The strategies and actions presented in MTF 2021 to 24 will serve to advance the achievement of the 4 national goals and 50 national outcomes, as well as the 17 SDGs. The broad priority areas are human capital development, social protection and social inclusion, transformational culture, rule of law and timely justice, governance and public sector effectiveness, economic stability and growth, employment and international competitiveness, environmental sustainability and climate change response, and rural development and urban renewal. A copy of the new MTF for 2021 to 24 can be found on both the PIOJ's website and the Vision 2030 Jamaica website. The PIOJ is grateful to all stakeholders who contributed to the development of the MTF 2021 to 2024. Looking now at the short-term economic outlook, October to December 2022, calendar year 2022, and fiscal year 2022-23. Generally, the prospects for the Jamaican economy in the short term are positive, given the impact of the removal of the previously implemented COVID-19 containment measures. This will continue to support the expansion of economic activities in most industries. Increased employment levels will also result in greater domestic demand in the short to medium term. The resumption of production at the Jamalco Alumina Refinery and gradual ramping up of capacity utilization are expected to result in relatively strong growth in the mining and quarrying industry in the short term. For the month of October, alumina production increased by 133.3%. In addition, the hotels and restaurants industry is expected to continue to record robust growth. Preliminary data on airport arrivals for October 2022 indicate an increase of 52% relative to October 2021. For the electricity and water supply industry, data for October indicate that electricity consumption increased by 4.9%, while water consumption declined by 2%. The downside risks to this positive outlook include: 1, supply chain disruptions due to the impact of geopolitical conflict, as well as the reimposition of COVID-19 management measures, particularly in China. These disruptions have already contributed to higher than desired inflation. 2, slower than anticipated recovery in the economies of Jamaica's main trading partners, which may temper the external demand for Jamaica's goods and services. 3, tightened monetary policy as central banks address the high inflationary environment, which could result in a stronger than expected slowdown in domestic demand as a result of more restrictive financial conditions. And 4, adverse weather conditions, particularly from hydrological events. Recent heavy rains associated with Tropical Storm Ian further highlighted Jamaica's vulnerability as a small island developing state. Within this context, economic growth is anticipated for the remainder of this calendar and fiscal year. For October to December 2022, it is projected that the economy will grow within a range of 2.5% to 3.5%, resulting in a calendar year growth, that is January to December 2022, in the range of 4% to 5%. For fiscal year 2022-23, the projection is for growth within the range of 3.5% to 4.5%. So in summary, preliminary data indicate that the Jamaica economy continued the recovery process during the review quarter. Most industries recorded growth, with the exception of mining and quarrying, which continued to be affected by technical challenges, and the construction industry, which reported a slowing relative to the surge in infrastructure projects that the industry benefited from during the corresponding quarter of last year. Generally, the indications are that the Jamaican economy will continue the growth trend within the short term, albeit at a slower rate, as more industries attain pre-COVID-19 levels of output. The pace of the recovery will be influenced by the challenges within the global economy, stemming from the supply chain shocks, its impact on inflation, and the contractionary measures being implemented by central banks to temper the rate of inflation. The negative impact of these challenges is expected to be outweighed by the continued strength of the recovery from the relatively low levels of output recorded in the previous year, supported by growth in domestic demand. However, the PIOJ's projections remain fluid, given the increased uncertainty in the global economy. These uncertainties have led to several downward revisions by the IMF. In its October World Economic Outlook publication, the IMF further downgraded its projection of global growth for 2022 to 3.2%, relative to 3.6% projected in April 2022. So in closing, the growth momentum continues amid tightening global financial conditions adopted to mitigate the high levels of inflation. During the medium term, the expectation is that inflation will gradually recede, easing the burden on Jamaican households. In this environment, it is important that monetary policy focuses on measures aimed at guiding inflation toward the target range, while fiscal policy focuses on strengthening public finances, supporting growth-inducing initiatives and reforms, while protecting the most vulnerable population from the inflation shock. Finally, I want to recognize a very dedicated and hardworking team here at the PIOJ. And I want to also remind us all to continue the whole of society collaboration as we sustain our efforts to make Jamaica the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business. Thank you. God bless you all.